Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Cameco. It is time for another update, and on this chart we have been tracking a couple of ideas actually here on the larger time frame. So initially, naturally, as we have a 3-wave move to the upside in this area, I could very easily consider it to be a wave A. I could consider this to be a larger ABC structure and form a more significant top once we complete the wave C. Now, this could also work out just as fine within the idea of an impulse in a double 1-2-1-2 setup. A third wave could follow. We would then expect a 4-5 and another 4-5 to complete the entire structure. And naturally, it could also work out as a leading diagonal. Yeah, if it can be a wave A, it can be a wave 1, part of a larger leading diagonal. Now, depending on which structure ends up unfolding, we would have different targets for this wave to the upside that is right now still extending actually. So, for the idea of a wave C, we would be watching the 100% extension of the wave A that is right around the $175 level. Yeah, that is a level the wave C is generally drawn towards. Now, certainly it doesn't need to get there, and it also does not need to stop there. We have seen it exceed even the ideal target for the wave 3, which is the 138.2% extension. Yeah, in the case of this forming a leading diagonal to the upside, the ideal target for the wave 3 would be the $660 level, around that area anyway. But this is for the idea of a leading diagonal. In the case we actually managed to form an impulse, the ideal target for the wave 3 would be quite a lot lower, the $355 level, around that area. Still the 138.2% extension, but it is following this idea of a 1-2 setup. Now, in the short term, you may be thinking, wait, we have a reduced target for an impulse. Well, technically yes, but this is also just the ideal target. It doesn't need to stop there, of course, but in the long run, we would expect an additional 4-5 structure if this is to build an impulse. Yeah, we would be tracking a 1, 2, 3, 4th and a 5th. This would not build the entire structure. We would need to be tracking a larger 1, 2, 3, 4th and a 5th to build the entire pattern. So in the long run, it would have a higher target. Yeah, it would have an additional 4-5 structure. Now, internally, within this structure, within this push to the upside that we are right now unfolding, it is a bit of the more weird patterns we have seen. Yeah, we have kind of a structure that could very easily still fit within the idea of an impulse, but at the same time, it refuses to create a clear wave tree, because I could easily track this all as a series of 1-2 setups within this area. Yeah, all of them impulses. Yeah, wonderful. But then we wouldn't get the wave tree. We would form another structure to the upside, very similar in length with what we have already built. What is this looking like? Well, it could very well fit within the idea of a diagonal structure. Yeah, I could consider this to be something like a 1, 2, 3, 4th and a 5th. In which case, yeah, once we build here this 5th wave, we would have a more significant top. This would follow through perfectly within the interpretation of the wave C. Certainly not within the idea of an impulse, not within the idea of a larger 5-wave move forming internally within a larger wave 3. Because within this structure, the movement, the pattern to the upside must be an impulse. Now, of course, we can still track this scenario. We are barely retracing into our areas of support, and yeah, we actually had a surprise here because we were looking with high probability for an extension lower, but no, we managed to extend into the next wave to the upside, and we will of course discuss more about that. But before we get to it, let's go a bit through what we were expecting. So within this area, we were tracking actually a 1-2, another 1-2 setup here, and the third wave that could have formed a more significant top, because within this structure, within this wave 3, we had all the necessary movements. We had a 1, 2, 3, 4th and a 5th. Now, the wave 5 within this wave 3 was of course a lot more parabolic than we would necessarily expect, and we usually expect the wave 3 to seem to be the strongest wave to provide the most difficulties in tracking the internal structure, but this wasn't necessarily the case. We were looking for a potential wave 3 top within this area and a wave 4 correction. And funnily enough, this interpretation was overlapping the areas of support perfectly with the green interpretation, where we had instead the idea of a series of 1-2 setups and we were looking for another 1-2 setup here to extend into a follow-up wave 3. Now, since we didn't form such a large retracement to get into those areas of support, I have to assume that this internal structure may actually be extending. Now, personally, I would actually not change a thing about the structures that we were tracking in the previous videos. I would only consider this to be an extension. So right now, the areas of support would need to be upgraded. Yeah, I would need to adjust them based on the current top, but I wouldn't necessarily be looking too much into those at the moment because this structure could very easily extend for quite a while longer. So what I'm focusing on internally is not even going to rely on these areas of support. Is not even going to matter to track them at the moment. Yeah, we would track internal levels that would indicate an early failure. Until we actually get an indication, we might as well be building instead another 1-2 setup that has actually formed the bottom here and is extending in a third wave, the upside, in which case, yeah, the larger areas of support would be of no use. Now, we were looking actually with high probabilities for extension lower, but we had an early signal that this structure was going to manage to get through. We broke above the $102.4 level. This was actually very important. It always is, because we were looking for even a potential 5-wave move to the downside in this area, but it was going to be a high probability extension lower only as long as we were below the last level of resistance. Above it was a signal that this structure was likely going to fail to extend lower, and so we did. We don't need this interpretation anymore, actually. Now, within this structure to the upside, as I was mentioning, I'm tracking an extension higher. And how do I track this extension? Well, I would initially consider that this is a potential extension of the 5th wave of this move. So I'm still tracking here a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and this would have been ideally the 5th wave for us in the previous video. And we were looking at this and we were considering, okay, we have a 5-wave structure within an ending diagonal. We don't need any extensions higher. This is a pretty clear impulse, pretty much textbook. I wouldn't necessarily need to even track extensions higher. This ideally retraces at least into one of the larger areas of support, which coincidentally were overlapping completely, and then we start our larger push to the upside. We didn't even need a large correction. All of these corrections along the way have been quite short, not necessarily the longest ones. We can see here one that took maybe a few months, but nothing too significant. Yeah. Now within this structure, once again, I'm focusing on an internal 5th wave to the upside, so we can actually even track here this idea to provide the full context. And within this 5th wave, I'm looking at an impulse. Again, we had already an initial, or not even necessarily initial, but we had a 5-wave move to the upside within this area. So I'm looking also for an impulse to form within this wave 3, but this is going to be a fragile structure. It will have quite early indications that it is going to fail, and right now I would believe that along this way, I would track this within the wave 3 as a 1-2 setup, another 1-2 setup here, and probably even a couple 1-2, 1-2 setups here, and this would be my 3rd wave. I would absolutely need this structure to hold the 50% retracement. So we have an area of support we already got into, and it starts at the $121.5, goes all the way down to the $116.3 level. If we don't manage to hold this area of support, I would be prepared for a more significant top to be in place. Now, this structure honestly looks quite incomplete within all interpretations I could come up with, and breaking below the $116 level might be even a signal that a more significant top has formed here in an ABC structure. This could still be an overshoot. This could still be part of a wave B. We only have a 3-wave pattern to the upside at this point, but yeah. Let's say we can look for the next area of support for continuation higher, but for me, I would not be bullish below the $116.3 level, yeah, to make that clear. Below the 50% retracement, it is a downgrade, and while it could still extend higher within certain patterns, I wouldn't consider them reliable, yeah. Now, keep in mind also that this is within a small time frame, so the structures and the patterns can easily morph into different interpretations, and ultimately, we may still see extensions higher, even below this level, but again, I would not consider it reliable. For me, it would be a massive downgrade, which is where I basically draw the line, where I would be prepared for a more significant downfall. I would probably still prefer another 4th, 5th, even within an idea of an ending diagonal, but to be honest, based on the initial wave within this area, I would still strongly prefer that we actually form an impulse, that we actually form a more clear 5-wave move to the upside within this area, yeah, something like this, including all the waves. So we could technically look perhaps for something like the 61.8% retracement for a wave 4, but I would not be using this to determine that there is a failure. I would already look for a failure below the $116 level. Yeah, I'm highlighting this as much as I can. The $116.3 level is very important to me. Now, if we extend higher, we will of course need to look for the next wave 4 correction. We would not be looking for the same area of support. It would need to be updated. But if you want, you can also look for the $103 level to hold for continuation within some sort of an ending diagonal. Yeah, perhaps we can actually allow even this entire wave to the upside to form as an ending diagonal, maybe even the $98.4 level. But for me, the 50% retracement in white remains the key. And for now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover. And I'll do my best to do that in the days, weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.